let's get into the meat of this. Okay. Thank you for joining us again for Finding Your Identity. This is episode 11. And since the previous episode was about side hustles, and the one before that was work-life balance, which didn't have a ton about career advice necessarily, or anything to do with other things other than work-life balancing. I thought, more specifically because I just did the side hustle episode, I thought that I would provide information in a candid fashion about how you can actually get up and running with a business. That was a little weird. With a business of your own, without the help of some company that's going to charge you a ton of money just to essentially do it for you or tell you things that you could figure out on your own, or listen to this podcast and find out for yourself. But I'm going to tell it from the perspective of someone who's essentially built web businesses for people, someone who's been doing web development for a long time. And I'm, going to just try to be upfront about the process and, even include some of the costs as I can kind of estimate them on the fly. But let's get started. So the first thing you need is an idea. You probably hear that in some seminar, and it's kind of a joke because generally people aren't just sitting around saying, I want to start a business and I just don't know what I want to sell. I think there are people that think, I need to start a business so I can make a lot of money. But generally speaking, I think people have an idea. They just don't know how to take that idea and turn it into something real. All right, those air conditioners were way too loud. So I'm going to try this again. This time I'm going to record without air conditioners, and hopefully this comes out a little bit better. So take two. Take a deuce. Hello, and thank you for joining us on Finding Your Identity for episode 11. Welcome back. And today I'd like to get a little bit deeper into the idea of creating an online web business, or even some of these could be, rules that you could use to apply to creating an online presence in general, if it's not even necessarily business related, although you want to try to capitalize on this and make money off of it. So then, therefore, it's a business, even if you're just trying to become popular online. But anyways, so what I want to do is I want to cover it from the perspective that I have, which is as a web developer, someone who's actually built web businesses before for several people, and also with the exposure I've had to establishing an identity for these businesses. So this fits well with our overarching theme for this podcast of finding your identity. This is maybe finding your business identity, let's call it. We'll see if that sticks later. But what I think is important is the idea. I think generally people don't just sit around saying, I'm going to start a business, but I just need to figure out what it's going to be, or what the what the business idea is going to be. But I do think that people have an idea and often think that they don't know how to get started because they don't have a ton of experience with creating a business online. So that's where I'm going to interject my own opinions and thoughts and ideas and advice about that. So I'd say, the first thing that's important is the idea. So we're going to kind of assume you have some kind of idea. And I'm going to build off of what I mentioned in the previous episode, in the side hustle episode, which is going to combine two things together. The idea about creating a t-shirt business. I mean, mainly, let's call that the business idea, starting a t-shirt business. There's also the potential that you want to create a handmade craft store that you are going to start on Etsy. So I can give a live example with what I did for my cousin later. But let's start off and let's pretend you have this idea that's to create t-shirts, and you decide, I'm super clever, I can write t-shirt slogans and make a buttload of money. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first kind of draw up a bunch of t-shirt ideas, literally sketch them on a piece of paper with a pretend t-shirt outline, and decide, colors, and potentially if it's multicolored, because you got to also consider there's going to be printing costs that could be different based off of whether they're, black and white or colored or multicolored. You got to pay extra for each color you add to a certain point, when then it's worth it to make it color. You got to figure out, okay, so I'm going to have a t-shirt business. I have a t-shirt to start with, and let's say I just come up with 10 ideas for t-shirts. I've got my 10 t-shirt ideas, and you can apply this to whatever. So you're making pillowcases that are novelty pillowcases, or you're making custom blankets, or you're, I don't know what else, custom frames, wood frames that you whittle yourself out of one piece of wood. I'm just kind of throwing stuff at the wall here, but let's just say that's the case, and you basically have your product. I guess what I'm trying to get to is you already have your product in hand that you think you're going to be able to sell. This is where I would come in, because I'm not necessarily going to help you figure out what to sell and what the product looks like, but this is the point where you would decide that you want to sell this online, and you would come to me and say this, I would like to create a website to sell my products. And I'm probably going to say, okay, it's not just going to be a website. Like, I feel like, my advice to you is going to be, let's sell this product. Let's sell your t-shirts in multiple places if possible, considering you're just starting out and you want to leverage what's available online to help get the word out. So I'd say, set up your Etsy shop. And this also gets you through the exercise of thinking through a lot of things that you are going to need to think through before I'm going to build you a website. Because one of the things I don't enjoy doing is trying to come up with your marketing slogan or filler copy for your front page, stuff like that. I really want, when I'm building a website, like, I want that stuff up ahead of time. So you're going to think of all this, and it's going to force you to think of all this, I should say, when you set up an Etsy shop, because I think that's a good place to start, just because they're going to provide a template for you to follow. It's going to say, what's the name of your store and what's the description of your store, and maybe you need to think of what the keywords are going to be. So it would be t-shirts, and then novelty t-shirts as a keyword phrase, and maybe it's religious slogans or snarky comments or random puns. I don't know. These are keywords that you would think of that represent and describe what your t-shirts are going to say and what they're going to provide to customers as enjoyment. So you have all that. Now you've set up that store. Now you start to think individually per t-shirt at that level. So you're going to have a name for this t-shirt. It's the terrible pun t-shirt, but it's terrible on purpose because it's tongue-in-cheek. Or you're going to think of what image you want to have to represent that. Now there's going to be a problem where you don't necessarily have the product yet. You potentially just want to test out the ideas. So you could create some kind of graphic that's essentially the t-shirt that you want, the physical picture of a t-shirt that you want, but you have like a blank slate that you then use a photo editing program to put the text overlay onto, and it would be the actual way that the text would look like. So you should make sure it's going to represent pretty much what the customer is going to end up getting in the mail when they order it. But I'd say you can have a template for a t-shirt. Excuse me. So something like your blank slate, because you may have black, white, gray, orange, I don't know, whatever the color scheme you're going for. Or if you just don't care, you're just going to offer a whole array of colors, whatever that is. The main thing is you're going to have some kind of examples, and you got to represent this through pictures. And you can have your main picture, which is selling your product, and then you can have multiple other pictures. If you have a back, if there's a saying on the back, if there's some punchline that needs to be delivered on the back of the t-shirt, then you got to show both. You got to have a picture that's going to show both. That can be tricky when you only have the single introductory picture, but there's tricks for doing that with pictures where you can kind of have them layered and then flipped over, and you have the two pictures essentially, or the two t-shirts in the same picture side by side, or whatever that is. But you got to think of all these things, and it's good to kind of write this out as a plan. This is kind of a business plan in a sense for you to think through how you're going to portray this to customers, because that is very important. It's your first impression, which they say first impressions last forever. If your first impression is terrible, they may just move on and not even give you a second thought. Unless your puns or your catchphrases are just so outstanding, they just kind of put up with your crap. But let's just say they won't. So think very carefully before you kind of throw any of this out there. Now, again, I said you may not have the product in hand. So sometimes I think if you can get established with a printer and you have very good understanding of your turnaround time in order to deliver the product, and sometimes this comes with experience with working with someone. It may not just be something that you could figure out without actually placing orders. If you're confident in your product, then you probably should be placing a small order. At the very least, you should be doing this to get a prototype so that you get a t-shirt and you can see what the print quality is. You may have to shop around for printers. Same as if you're mass producing blankets or pillowcases or whatever. If it's handmade, then there you go. You just, produce your product yourself, you hand make it, and then you can take your pictures of it. And I'd say, make sure you take the extra care to take really good quality pictures, because you don't want something that has bad quality of a picture that doesn't, look like a great picture of your product, giving the impression that your product is not that great, and then it's going to be of the same kind of quality. A poor picture could represent a poor product. So you want to take the time to make sure that you're doing that as well as possible. So now you've established that baseline, I should say, for a listing. You've got your listing, and you put in several listings for each of the products you want to have in your store, and you're ready to go. So now what? Well, Etsy, I believe, they think they cycle through. At the very least, they're adding you into the search engine. Now, it might be hard to get featured. I don't know if Etsy actually has the ability to kind of advertise or to pay extra to be a part of a homepage featured list. or if it's just based off of popularity, but you kind of got to rely a little bit on, you got to rely a lot on yourself to promote it. You can rely a little bit on Etsy to help you get it out there, because like I said, if someone's searching for something specific and it's unique enough, it'll be in their search listings, and you won't be among a sea of other Etsy stores. But that's kind of the first step. So you have an Etsy store established. That is the hard part. You have that Etsy store established so that you can have something to point to. So now word of mouth is the biggest obvious way to spread the word, and you start off by trying to hit your family up and friends up for some money. And if you make a great product and they love it and they support you, then they'll probably be more than willing to buy a t-shirt or buy whatever, blanket or pillowcase, or picture frame whittled from one piece of wood. I'd like to see that. But if you've leaned on your family and friends and your close-knit network, and you've leaned on them, there's the potential for them to then pass the word on to their friends, and essentially you're relying on viral marketing, and you're hoping that things go viral, and you're starting off with your close-knit community. But sometimes it's not enough, or it's going to be tapped out pretty quick, I should say. There could be 100 people in there, and hey, you got 100 sales, but then what? Because it's not the kind of product that's you need to buy every week, like milk. You have something that essentially they are going to wear for hopefully a year or a few years, because you're hopefully making something of good quality. So it could be just a one-time purchase, at least for that individual item. It may be that you have several t-shirts and they want to buy 10 of them, so they have a different one for every day of the week and some. So if you've got that kind of a product that they'll come back, or even I think some people who make homemade face creams or lotions and stuff like that, that's another thing that potentially they're going to come back for more. So that's great, and you can establish a smaller base in the beginning, and that could help you sustain and maintain some slow growth and keep you in business. But if it's a product that is a one-time purchase product for the most part, then you have to appeal to the masses somehow. And this is where marketing comes into play. And again, I have a background in marketing, so I know a little thing about marketing. And I'd say if you got money, which a lot of times people are starting these businesses because they want to make money, because they don't necessarily have a lot of money. So unless you were able to get some funding from some source up front, I'm going off the assumption you don't have a lot of money and you're trying to build this from the ground up. If you had a lot of money, you could jump straight to advertising it. Even if you don't have a lot of money, I'd say if you could at least get a little bit of money, like I'm talking, a couple $100. I think for $1,000 budget, you could do some serious marketing through search engine marketing through Google. I think if you your product really well, I think that's key. If you know your product well enough that you can describe it and you can sell it verbally or visually through pictures and visually through words, then I think you could do a lot through campaigns through Google. And I think you don't have to spend a ton of money. You can have $1,000 and actually can go pretty far if you're smart about it. If you buy very specific keyword phrases, not just t-shirts, because that would just be a waste of money. But if you were to, say they were religious puns, or they were, inspirational quotes or inspirational puns, I don't know. Pairing those two words together will narrow the search results, or I should say, they will make it so that your ads will show up in the narrower search results. So you actually can get by with paying a little bit less money for that exposure and for the click-through or the impressions that are going to occur. And I believe with Google, I think you have the option to do you could choose to do it by impressions, which is pay per 1,000 impressions. So there may be scenarios where the ad shows up and it's not necessarily a place where it's going to be clicked, but you can guarantee, and they can guarantee an audience of X number of people. So they're going to say maybe 10,000 people are going to see this, and you're paying $1 per 1,000 impressions. So that's, if the math is right, what is that, like $10? I don't know. Let's call it $10, because I don't want to think hard because it's hot. And I'm outside recording. So I think, though, as I regroup my thoughts here, what I'm saying is it may not cost you a lot. Maybe it's $10. Maybe it's $100. Actually, I think it's probably $100. What did I say? 10,000. So you spend $100 to get 10,000 impressions. Now, I don't recommend that for the t-shirt business. After all that said, after all my quibbling, I don't even know if that's the right word. Man, I'm off to a great start. So, needless to say, I think what I'm trying to get at is you would do click-through, pay-per-click, because the clicks are going to equate to some kind of value, which you can track, I think, better. So my recommendation would be, say you can set your campaign. So you say, I'm willing to pay 50 cents per click, and that's the most I'm willing to pay. If you can justify it, because at the 50 cents per click, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to convert into a sale. But if you consider that you're willing to pay that 50 cents per click, and it's 1,000 clicks, right? So that's $5, right? So you're willing to spend the $5 to get one sale. You got to factor that into the cost of the item. How much you're willing to spend to sell that item. So that item now is already $5 in the hole. So you paid $10 to have the t-shirt made, $5 to get somebody to buy it through a search engine. Now you're in it for $15. You got to sell that thing for at least $20 if you want to try to make a profit, because you got to factor in shipping, you got to factor in your payment processing fee. If it's through Etsy, they take, I think I mentioned in the last episode, they take 20 cents per transaction, and there's the other costs that might be associated with the store that you got to factor in. You got to make sure that that's factored into the cost. So maybe you need to sell it for $25, because $10 to make, $5 to advertise it. Actually, I think I misspoke, because it isn't that you're not paying the $5 for the click through to get somebody to go to your Etsy store. I mean, you could advertise your Etsy store, but this is going to come into play, I'm thinking, when you actually have your website up and running, because you'd pay for the click through to a website where you're not paying transaction fees. That would cut out some of the costs. But let's just say you were. I mean, for sake of argument, somebody may just want to advertise their Etsy store through Google, and you can. You got to factor that in. You got to factor that extra $5 that you're spending just to get one conversion on your store. So again, know your costs. That's whatever they are. That's key. You have to know how much you're spending to get that product into the hands of a customer, and you got to figure out, okay, what's what price do I really need to sell this for to break even? What's my break even cost? That's the first thing. And then you got to start to factor in, what are you trying to gain in terms of a profit margin that's sustainable? Because a lot of people run into a trap, and I forget the actual term for this because it's been a while since school, but the trap is where you essentially have to discount in order to survive, and you don't want to run into that kind of a problem too early on, because if you're discounting because you're trying to beat a competitor, or you're discounting because it seems like your price is just always too high, you need to make adjustments in other places. Maybe you start buying in bulk and your cost per t-shirt goes from $10 to $8, right? So you just gained $2 there. Maybe you really figure out your skills in terms of setting up your ad campaigns, and it's not $5 to acquire a customer, but it's $3 to acquire a customer. That's where you can start, really carving out the price structure. I'm trying to think of the words because it's been so long since went to college and learned all these big words that I used to think I'd use to impress people, but when you forget them, then you just look like an idiot. Anyways, if I cared about that, I wouldn't be talking. So I'd say the takeaway is, and I'm really just breaking this down into layman's terms for you people, not because I can't remember the marketing terms. Not to say that I need to break it down for you people. I just like to dig holes and hide in them. Yeah, and rebury myself up to the neck, and it's just fun for me. So, getting back on track, because I'm losing my train of thought. The price structure that you're gonna be most profitable with is one where you can make adjustments to yield more of a return, to yield more profits. And like I said, it's a matter of getting, your $10 cost per t-shirt to $8 because you can reap the benefits of buying in bulk and cutting out unnecessary expenses. Maybe you have a payment processor that's charging you 4 or 5%, and you realize that you can do it through PayPal for 2.5%, and you can save yourself that way. Now, because you do, in some sense, if you want to capitalize on certain things, you do need to have the ability to discount an item so that you can appeal to other people during like Black Friday or around Christmas time. So there has to be something built into it. Now, getting started, you may think, oh well, if I just basically build in $1 profit, then I'm fine because I'll just sell 10,000 of these and then I'll make $10,000. But you can't look at it like that. You got to think, oh well, what if I'm only able to sell 100 of these things, or I can only sell 100 of these per month, and I'm only making $100 per month. From a profit perspective, that $100 a month is obviously not sustainable in terms of sustaining any kind of reasonable lifestyle other than the cardboard box hobo lifestyle. So you got to figure out, how am I going to do this? Now, again, there's plenty of examples where companies operate at a loss in order to get started, but those are companies that have initial funding. You, starting out from the ground up, don't necessarily have the funding, so you got to try to be at least breaking even, and then a little bit, in order to really justify it. And if this is a side hustle, then great, but you don't want to be trying to do this at a loss unless you're so confident that you're going to be able to build your brand and your identity up so big that you'll be able to justify charging more later, which again is risky because people are going to really become used to the price of the item. People may come to love it, but they're going to expect to not pay more than $25. So, it's a slippery slope there. That being said, that $25 may be your price point that you have to stick to, and then you got to figure out how to trim in other areas. So I went on a whole tangent there about price, but I think it is important. You got to figure out how much to charge for your item. I think it's important that you do put in a lot of thought and go back and replay this episode from the first 25 minutes and listen to me fumble around with getting to the point. But the point is that you got to figure out your price, and there are the tricks to trim it. And once you do have that price, that's where you put the price into Etsy. And until I get to the website part, whatever you're selling through, if you happen to be selling this through eBay, which I think is trickier to sell this kind of good through eBay, I think Etsy is the better place for the homemade stuff, or the handmade stuff, for the t-shirt type stuff. Maybe consider it's appealing to that kind of target market that Etsy already kind of appeals to, so you can leverage that. When you get into having your own website, then you can do your own thing. But now you've got traffic, and now you've got things coming in. You want to kind of build your brand reputation, and the best way to do that is to do that through social media. And I think what you'll find is Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest, and YouTube, and maybe Snapchat coming up like that. I don't know if that's really the best marketing channel, but I don't know. It serves some purpose. But needless to say is you're gonna establish yourself through those social media networks just because you want to try to build some brand identity. So I think what you should start to consider is, if this is Jane's homemade t-shirts, that may not be the best thing. If it's like you got some kind of hipster's t-shirts or something. I don't even know. I'm trying to think of this stuff off the top of my head, but I don't know what you're thinking. But let's say it's just Fun Puns t-shirts, and that's what you want to call it. So you're going to establish your Twitter account that's maybe Fun Pun t-shirts, or something like that. And you'd create, you'd have to create kind of a business profile off of Facebook through their pages, I guess, is how they do that now. I've in the past, I've actually gone out of my way to kind of create a Facebook identity that was specific to a brand. And it's kind of a pain, because you then ultimately want to try to promote that brand back to your friends, and all your friends are associated with your personal account. So I think the way Facebook has it is you can create kind of a business page or profile that's built off of your personal account. However you do that. I hate Facebook, so I'm not really encouraging people to use it. Although I like Instagram to some degree, so I'd promote them even though Facebook owns them. I'd still say that whatever you're doing, establish your common identity across all these platforms, and have a logo, have something that can identify you, whatever that is. I'd say you're going to put that on your product somewhere. It needs to be some kind of brand stamp on the product, but that should allow you to start to establish that recognizable identity, that recognizable logo, so that other people would see it and they go, oh, I haven't heard of Fun Pun t-shirts. I think I should go start looking at them, because I saw somebody wearing one of those t-shirts, and they had this really cool slogan on it, or this really funny pun on it, and I want to go see what they have. I'm maybe not going to buy the same one as him, but I'll go check out Fun Pun t-shirts, As I'm saying it, it's like, come on now, Fun Pun t-shirts, funpunt-shirts.com. If it exists, you're welcome for pushing a whole bunch of traffic there. My 2 listeners now will go to your website. But, once that social identity kind of gets built, then you also have another way to reference to that from other sources. So you make flyers or business cards or pamphlets or whatever you're going to have that's going to be sent out in some form. That's where you will reference back to some of those social media platforms. You do your best to try to create the same name. Hopefully Fun Pun t-shirts will be available on Twitter, and Fun Pun t-shirts will be the name of the page on Facebook that's searchable, and wherever else. Sometimes you can't. You've definitely seen instances where it's whatever brand name something dash t-shirts or underscore something like that. Like this podcast, I created FY underscore identity as the username for Twitter, because FY identity without the underscore was taken, and finding your identity was incidentally too long, so I just did FY underscore identity. So you can do at FY underscore identity to find this podcast's to find their Twitter account, this Twitter account. And I do encourage people to reach out, as my shameless plug. But I think, whatever it is, you want to try to have something that's common amongst all the platforms, that ties everything together nicely, that's not confusing, and that you can reference back easily, and doesn't take up a ton of space on a business card. If it's on a website, then you can fit as much as you need to. But a lot of times people just put the icons at the bottom of the website and they just link out to the respective sources. So let's move over in that direction now to the website. So some of the key things, I think if you've started with the path I recommend, which is through Etsy or some established platform, eBay, Amazon, I guess, but say you're starting through Etsy, you've done all the thinking about the product, and I think that's important. You've done the thinking about the brand slogan and the description of what your business is and what it's providing to people. You've come up with your pricing strategy. You figured out, hopefully by that point, what your distribution strategy is going to be. I'm assuming you're shipping these items. Maybe, you are selling these at craft fairs, which I think is good. I call that part of the viral side of it. There are costs, I think, for having booths at craft fairs, but however you're doing it, you're still going to have marketing materials there that are going to point people back to the web presence. If you want to do this in a broad way to capitalize, on the most reach you possibly can, the broadest reach you possibly can. So assuming that all that's out of the way and you have figured out all the nitty-gritty details about your product and you want to start a website, and you say, okay, well, I have all the thoughts, you're probably going to have to get, for the website, you're going to have to get a little bit more content to figure out what you're going to provide to people and how you're going to describe different things, different aspects. But for the most part, I'm going to tell you, if you can buy the domain funpuns.com or funpunt-shirts.com or whatever that domain is, that's your first step, is get the domain. It could be that something is not readily available, but you figure out how to change the name just slightly, where maybe it's got a hyphen in it, or maybe it's Fun Pun T-shirts are great, or whatever it is. You got the domain name. I'm not going to try to think of a domain name for you or research what's available. You get the domain name. And again, this is where I'm helping you build this website. You're coming to me at this point. And I'd say, okay, you got a domain name. And if you're doing this, if you want to try to do this through a GoDaddy, I think GoDaddy probably is good for small businesses, as much as I don't like it personally as a hosting site, a hosting provider to host my own websites. I'm a little bit further ahead with how I handle like hosting websites, but that's just me. But I think for the average person, GoDaddy could be a good place to do this. If you were to come to me though, and I'm building a website, I would host it through my own hosting provider, which is a reliable host. And, I'd charge you a certain amount per year for that hosting, depending on some of the details. But, GoDaddy's going to potentially sell you the domain. Also, I recommend doing this through WordPress because it's super easy to get e-commerce websites up and running through WordPress. So I'd say if you do this through GoDaddy, you purchase your domain through them. You purchased your WordPress hosting through them, which is a specific hosting package, which kind of gets you up and running with point and click features, and you even may be able to get a theme out of them for free, and that's super easy, or even installed by the time you get to the WordPress dashboard. WordPress itself, once you get into it, has a whole slew of free templates that you could pick from, and then just modify by adding your logo and your slogan, and even they have the ability to change some of the color schemes for these these three themes or templates. And so I'd say getting up and running with WordPress is great, because you just kind of went from 0 to 60 because you got your domain, you got your hosting provider, you've got that platform now set up with point and click, follow the directions that they provide you, and you've got a link to your landing page. Now it's funpuntshirts.com/something admin, I don't know if GoDaddy sets it up that way. It's usually WP-admin, but sometimes it's /admin. If GoDaddy is setting up WordPress that way, but you get to your dashboard, and now you actually have a dashboard. It's going to look somewhat like an interface that you might be familiar with. I mean, it's different than Etsy, but you're going to have similar options where it's going to say, create a listing or create a post. I guess that's where the steps that people get lost on. And that's why I'm here to help guide you, because what you'll find is you'll end up on this dashboard and you won't have an e-commerce cart set up right away. Unless GoDaddy has that option where they essentially install your WordPress and they package it together with a prepackaged e-commerce platform, e-commerce shopping cart, which generally I recommend people to use WooCommerce. There's also eShop and Woofu, I think it was the other one that someone had told me that they used, and I had to once work with them on that site. But WooCommerce is great. Like I recommend, these things specifically. The GoDaddy, you don't necessarily have to buy the domain through GoDaddy, but if you're not super savvy with it, it might be tricky, because I'd say Google Domains is a good place to buy the domain. And then, but the extra step there would be that you'd have to then go into Google Domains and actually change how the DNS points back to GoDaddy for the WordPress website hosting, which kind of can be tricky. So if you're just looking to get up and running with the business and a website, I'd say you get your GoDaddy domain and hosting, and it's all in the same place. And like I said, you're up and running. Now, here's where I need to, kind of interject, because you got to get the e-commerce cart set up somehow. You need a way to sell products in a shopping cart, and that doesn't come prepackaged with WordPress, but it's super easy to install. It's a plugin. So, you're on the WordPress site and you're going to see a section called plugins, and you'd click on it and you'd have add new or search or something to that effect, and you'd just go and you can go search for plugins, or you can go directly to WooCommerce and find the WordPress plugin for WooCommerce and download it directly through them. Now, of course, they're going to try to get you to upgrade to Pro and pay money for other extensions, but out of the box works great. You don't necessarily need anything more than that. So I'd say what you do is you can go through WordPress plugin search, go through that and search for the words WooCommerce. It's WOO and then commerce. Search through the WordPress dashboard for that, and then you'll see it where it'll say WooCommerce shopping cart or something to that effect, and click install and activate it, and then you've got it and it's up and running. And then they're going to have some preset guidelines that you can follow, so you'll be able to click through from WooCommerce's section of the WordPress website to set up your store. So you'll go into their settings and configuration, and you'll set up the same stuff that you did on Etsy with the store name. If the store name is different from what your WordPress website name is, which that is most likely not the case. So it would kind of inherit that. That's your store name is Fun Puns T-shirts. But you would take that and you would actually put your description in to the configuration. I'm trying to think through the steps, because I haven't actually looked at that dashboard in a while, which I believe actually, now that I think about it, a lot of that store information would be within WordPress under their settings and under their general settings, and you'll see a couple options. That's also something from that left-hand navigation that you can get to the settings, which has the site name and the description. But you're going to need to put in some details. I believe you're going to have to, it should come out of the box in the currency of dollars, but there's a chance that you need to change that. Not likely, but you could change it if you accept euros. If you're in Europe listening to this, or somewhere else in the world, it will work if you can download it and get it. It's not blocked. But once you have your basic configuration for your store up and running, you'll have to upload your products or create products, or as they say, or add products. You'll see it's another option. It's actually another section within WordPress, but you'll find the section where it is to add products, and that's what I'm thinking is going to be similar to Etsy, because you're going to see an option to put in a picture. You're going to have a title for that particular item you're selling with the description for it, and you're also going to have options to put in like tear weight, and if you're going to bundle it with other items or link them. There's like for upsells, there's all those kind of options in there. And those are just the e-commerce options. There's other things that you can even install in WordPress, which is kind of the next thing, is stuff to make your site SEO, or search engine optimized. That's what SEO stands for. If you want to make it search engine friendly, there's a ton of them ton of plugins, I should say, that offer the ability to increase or enhance your search engine optimization. So you can kind of just go in again into plugins and the search area, and you can search for search engine optimization, which I think is critical. Like when it comes to building a website, you need to be optimized. That's why I recommend WordPress, first of all, because WordPress will come out of the box already coded or written in HTML or markup in the way that makes it optimized for the browser, but then it has a ton of plugins that will help you optimize your website. Like schema is important when it comes to things with images or videos, or even content. So you can have a plugin that can optimize the schema of the website. So it's a word that you should be aware of. There's ways to keyword optimize, and I've used several different SEO engines, but Yoast, Yoast, is one that I really like, because I feel like it's super simple to use, and it seems to do a pretty good job at walking you through how to optimize each page. It even shows you kind of scores about each of your listings. So I think that's kind of critical, is getting your SEO game on, to be cheesy, but you really need to be optimized for search engines. So I think that's kind of critical. So you got your website, you got your domain name that points to your website, you got your shopping cart set up in the WordPress setup, and you've got listings built into it, and you have some SEO in there. Now you can take the extra steps to integrate it with social media. So you can actually integrate it with Twitter and Facebook and Pinterest and whichever ones have available plugins. But essentially what it is you could make it so that every time you post a new listing, you could hit a button and it would post it to Twitter and post it to Facebook to let your followers see that you have a new item listed. And that's another way to kind of leverage marketing and viral marketing specifically, or social media marketing. And it can be important because, it's free. If you can do it that way, it's free. You don't necessarily have to pay money to market it that way. So it's often a good idea just to kind of build in the social networks into your WordPress instance as well. So I'd say following those steps and getting to that point is critical. Now, there's another trick. I don't want to call it a hack, but it's kind of trying to find your way around optimizing for search engines that I think a lot of people don't often recognize right off the bat. But since WordPress, being it was originally a blogging platform, it's built for blogging. What I'd say is the best option is to spin off a small section of your WordPress instance. So essentially, you'd create a new page, as they call it in WordPress, that would then be your blog. You essentially are going to leverage the platform for a blogging platform, and whatever your product is, use that as the ability to talk about it. And even paying freelancers a little bit of money to create content, to write up articles or write up information about your products is going to go a long way. It's kind of a neat trick, I think, to promote items is, or promote your brand in general, is leveraging the blogging, because the blogging is full of text, context, and content that could be picked up by search engines if you do it properly. So I'd say what you really want to do is you want to find a way to have somebody or you yourself create content that talks intelligently about your products or your brand or whatever. Maybe it's related to the industry. Provide value in the content so people enjoy reading it and find value in reading it, while also leveraging the ability to say things that are going to point people back to, have search engines come up when people search certain words that'll end up pointing back to your website. So I think it's kind of an interesting trick that a lot of times is being leveraged by big companies, and there's no reason why little people can't. People starting off with their Fun Pun t-shirt companies, there's no reason why they can't leverage the same thing. It's time consuming, and I think it's worth it. Like it is time consuming, and I think it can be tricky because you have to kind of know really what to say. But when you start to really think about it, it's such an easy way to kind of promote it. Plus, you're talking about your own products, and the more that you're comfortable talking about your own products, the better you're going to be at selling those products. So I think it's definitely the angle that you should take to try to gain a little bit extra from search engines. And you never know, you might build a following just off of people who enjoy reading the articles. And then to kind of flip it back around is you should post links to those articles on social media so that it's not just you shoving products and trying to sell stuff down the throat of your followers. You're also providing content and stuff that's of context similar to the t-shirt business or whatever your product business is, that's lighter, and it's not so much a sales pitch, but it's unconsciously, subconsciously, unconsciously, subconsciously, a sales pitch that you're essentially getting people to think about your product without thinking about your product directly, but you're kind of tricking them a little bit. But it's okay, because they need your t-shirts, they need your fun puns to be across their chest. So it's something that you can again leverage, and content is king when it comes to social media. You can't always rely on just posting a picture and a price for an item and expect people to continue following you. They don't find a ton of value in that. So that's where the blogs come in handy, or creating that content. So I think that's all that I really have to say about this as I'm looking, and it's 50 minutes in, because I think that's a lot to digest. But fortunately, you can pause and replay. And again, you can reach out to me. I'm Derek T. McKinney at Twitter, or on Twitter, Derek T. McKinney. I'm also at FY_identity for the podcast, Finding Your Identity. And if you got questions, reach out to me. And I also want to make an appeal to people to send me their stories, because I do want to talk about things that are not just my things necessarily, even though I'm kind of spearheading this adventure to talk about finding your identity. But I'm going to keep talking until someone tells me to shut up. And even when they tell me to shut up, I'm going to tell them to shut up back, because I'm mature, and keep talking. But I'd love to hear from other people in all seriousness for the value that I think perspective would create coming from different people from different backgrounds. And I'd love to hear from you again. And thank you again for listening to this episode of Finding Your Identity. Finding Your Identity. Finding an Identity. Whatever the name of this podcast is. Thank you for listening, and have a good day or night. Until next time, I'm watching you.